Hi, my name is Kevin and Tom from TOX Pressetechnik. I want to show you a couple of tricks using the TOX software. Let's get started. I do have my TOX software open here, and I do have an active connection to a demo kit. So on the top left, you can see a TOX icon where you can see some user information, login and logout information. You can also minimize or close the software if it's open in full screen and see some version history. Then you have the option to select your unit if you have multiple units connected to your TOX software. This applies mostly for the windows and icons aside from the dashboard. Within the dashboard, you can display multiple units at the same time. On the top right, you can see a reset button where you can reset your error messages and informations. Then you have a login window. If you log out, you can log back in using the TOX3 username and password. You can change the user management inside the settings, and you can also set up an automatic logout after a defined time. On the top left, you can see a backward and forward button, which is very helpful, mainly for touchscreens as well. And then you can see some icons displaying your processes and diagrams, your messages and archives, your in and output, your configuration of the current selected unit, and other things. On the bottom bar, you can see the current status. You can see that I do have an active connection. My process is released. I do have a position of my drive, a force signal, current selected process, and so on. On the bottom right, you can manually drive your connected unit. If you go here into manual mode, I can jog forward, and you can see the position on the bottom bar is increasing. Please note that these are sliders where you have to keep pressing. I can also go into automatic mode and drive a predefined process. If I interrupt my slider, I do get an error message because I didn't keep my start opened, and I can reset my error message using this button. I can start again and finish my process. In this dashboard, you can populate widgets and you can edit the pages. So you can add multiple pages to your dashboard, and you can add widgets freely to your needs on your dashboard. Those could be hot links to any of the settings here, or it could be a diagram showing one of your defined favorites. So here I do have only one unit connected, but if you have multiple, you can select the unit you want to display here. If I add this diagram, I can increase the size of it, edit another window, let's say the yield point. Also here increase the size of it, and then I can save it. And here I do have my diagrams populated. So you can see my force over position, which is at around 0 until I hit my piston hits a spring and I go up to 1 kilonewton. And you can see a zoom of my defined curve, which is the yield point here. To define a zoom, you can click on a graph to open it up and define it, or you can go into diagrams here. Slide to the left, I zoom out, and on the top right, you can define your diagrams here. I did prepare some other dashboards that I want to show you. So here I have some hot links, my graphs, and some status. And these are basically the same graphs because I only have one unit connected, but you can see they are ordered in a different way. Let's continue explaining the processes and diagrams. So in the second icon, I can find diagrams, and here I do have my last executed drive of my press. If I drive again, my curve is updated, and if I drive again, it just continues updating. So navigating the diagram, you can slide from left to right in order to zoom in. And when you zoom in, you can, for instance, look at your curve and look at one of the 5,000 diagram points. You can also display the history, so a trend curve, and you can see it in gray here. If I increase the size a little and drive again, you will see that my curve will move. And I do see my trend history as well displayed in gray. On the top right, you can define a favorite, so you can zoom in to a specific zoom and add a new favorite or select one to override. On top left, you can select the channel you want to display. Please note that I also selected the right unit if I have multiple units connected. Top left also, you can select which axis and track you want to show. So if I want to show the slope, I can display the slope maybe on the same axis. Zooming out, you can click your mouse and go to the left, or you can also just click on optimal zoom. And then you can zoom back in and display your orange slope, which is the slope of your force. Let me disable the trend curves again. I can also display, for instance, the velocity, but let's say I want the velocity on a different axis. So here on the right, I now have a different axis for my velocity. And this way you can add multiple things, like I can also display my time on a new axis. And now I populate my diagram more and more. And also here I can save these predefined favorites under a name, and then I can display this in the dashboard using a widget. Furthermore, you can also move your diagram using these and move it in area. The second window is a technology window. This is where you can see settings of your technology. I will not go into depth on these. The third one is a teach window. So you can see the processes that have an envelope curve enabled, and you can teach this envelope curve. One thing is important, that you define the number of teach cycles, and once you start teaching, you have to teach all of these cycles, so you need to make sure you have enough components. You can also teach an envelope using the archive, so archived historic curves, and there you can select the curves and use them to define and teach your envelope. In the editing mode, you can edit your processes. So here I have my predefined processes, and we were mainly using process number 31 for this demonstration. So my process is defined by many process steps, and I can include more steps using the toolbox, standard toolbox, and I can include just drag and drop further tools in. For instance, like this, forward stroke, and now I have added another forward stroke, and it's still zeros, the parameters, and here I can populate this. So going into it, you have a check transducer, define a repair strategy, what if something goes wrong, and you start your curve record. Here's also where you define what channel to use and what the different tracks are. So type 1, type 2, and so on. All the channels you can define here. You can define the sampling rate, so how long do you want to record your curve, or how many samples do you want. So this is a frequency or a sample every millisecond. In the forward stroke, you have a target position or force, and then you edit the position of force in this position window. You need to define a velocity, and you can supervise your movement. There's some additional functions like transition velocity that you can enable here. I can also close my toolbox again. I can also open my diagram of my curve. So here now I see my diagram of my defined process. I can only see the diagram if I actually executed it, otherwise I don't have data to populate here. Also, I want to point out the pressing step, number 11. Here I do have a target force. I set a velocity, and I could have a speed override, which means at 70% of my force, my speed is reduced. I can also set up a transition velocity, position monitoring or time supervision, or a stop event, like an event occurred in a window. Talking about windows, we already have a couple of windows predefined here, and I can select and edit these under the Windows step here. So I can select an ElectricDrive core up to 5 windows. I can add a new window, and using the pen I can move it freely in space. I can also move single points, but it's always defined by 4 corners. If I click on a line, I can also prohibit the line from being touched, or if I click twice on it, I can define an entry or exit direction of my curve. On the bottom right, you can see the store buttons to save your changes. My changes are now overwritten to my power module core, which means the power module core now has the new process instructions. If I disconnect my HMI or my laptop from my power module core and I drive from PLC, my power module will know the windows and the process supervision. Inside my windows, I can also define common parameters, like it must be crossed, or what should happen if the window effect is negative or positive. I can also hard code my window parameters, where is each corner, and define the line properties. I can extend lines as well, maybe to spare another window. I can move my window relative to an event, so independent of position, I can move it depending on an event like slope detection or another window entry point. I can have common functions to supervise my process, like a mean calculation, an average of my y value, a time supervision. I can have a math function, like a yield point, digital input, turning point, integral, and so on. For many of these, like the yield point, the slope is actually important. So if I look on window number 2, and I go to math function of window number 2, I could want to detect a yield point here, and therefore I look at my slope. Let me edit it to the graph, and you can see my yield, the orange curve, is jumping up as soon as I hit a spring. And I want to detect whether it jumps above a value that I define here. The window result can be either okay if there's a yield point detected, or it's activated that no yield point must be within this window. When I save this and I look at my diagram and I drive, so here you see a small X marked where the yield point is, or in my window results screen. You can manually load them, and in window number 2 you can see where my yield point was. Alright, that was it for the second part about the processes. Now I want to show you the messages and what you can see behind the third icon in your TOX software. First, the diagnosis is mainly where you can see your error messages and some information. Then you can filter the information type as well as the date. With the eye, you can always filter what columns you want to show and hide in your overview. If you click on one, you can also get some details, or you can jump to it right away. And you can also search, for example, for a unit number, a status number, or a date and time. If you click jump to, you will jump right to the curve that actually provoked this error message. So if I click jump to, I get my archive showing the curve that provoked this error message. Continuing on the archive, you see your curves here, and you can refresh the archive, and you can select a curve that you want to display. All of these can be changed in size. You can also select what you want to show in the columns. And on the right, you see the actually detailed information of your curve. You can use the diagram on the bottom right, just like in the diagram window, so you can edit the tracks you want to display on different curves, maybe different track on a different axis, and you have all the information that is taken. Also, you have detailed information. So there you can find the final values if you have selected them, technology information, process steps, what was actually the instruction of my process, because it may have changed now, the Windows parameters, what were my definitions, and the results of my windows. So here again, you can find your slope as previously explained. You can also select multiple curves at once. Let me disable the velocity again. And now you see multiple curves displayed on top of each other. You can export them easily using this button and select what you want to export and how, either in CSV or XML. But for bigger quality exports, you probably want to set up a quality report that you do in the settings, export settings, and this is where you can add quality exports. If you have a curve with an envelope detection enabled, you can use the teach function to teach those and use it as data to calculate where your envelope should be. You can also filter your archive, being either only OK or not OK curves. And you can also enter filter text. So this is a free window where you can, for example, put in a process number. And you can also select from what time to what time your filter should apply. The last two screens we have are the final values that I can manually or automatically load. And here you can see final values. Please note, you can only see a final value if your process has the function, the process step, save end values. Type maximum value. Only those are displayed in your final values screen. You can also see a status message, and again you can select what columns you want to see, maybe also the intermediate values, and you can store it as a favorite. The favorite again you can use as a widget on your dashboard. You can also search here for specific search terms and this way filter your list. Same applies for the window results. Here you can also select the columns you want to show, save it as a favorite, include it in your dashboard, and you can manually load or select an automatic load. Here you can see a unique ID that can be also a part ID that is transferred via the PLC, the channel number, and the window number. If you double click on it, you get more detailed information like an overview, the entry and exit points, as well as an evaluation, whatever you have defined in your window. Please note, all of these values you can also transmit via the field bus to your PLC. Next, I want to show you the in and outputs. In the in and output screen, you can see field bus in and outputs, where you can see an overview of your field bus. It's divided between inputs to your left and outputs to your right. And then it is explained as in the documentation, the TOX fixed table, the customer fixed table, which together stand for 10 words. And then you have the switching table that is fully customizable, both in and output. So you can see what you currently have on your field bus. And you can pop these open and see a green a light for a high, and then a gray one if it's low. So if I run my process, of course, these will change because my output on the field bus will change. This is very handy to see what you have on your field bus and if your communication is working and what is actually communicated. It's also handy to troubleshoot, of course, your field bus status. On the other one, analog digital input and output, you can see your input and outputs on the power module core. So there's a couple of digital IOs and the status of your edge unit. So normally via our internal system bus, the edge unit is connected from the electric power drive to the power module core and communicates also some signals. These are on the power module core itself. So 1, 2, 3, 4 digital inputs, as well as 1 digital output. On the edge unit, again, you have a couple of digital inputs that I currently am not using. Then you can also see the status of your edge unit analog signals and encoder signals. This is very handy if you want to see what you actually currently have on your edge unit and what you are measuring. For instance, this is our analog input from -10 to 10 volts on 16-bit ADC, and our analog input from 0 to 10 volts on a 12-bit ADC. And of course, if you have a signal here, this raw value will change depending on your signal. Those analog values you can scale, setting up the channel, and that's what you do in configuration under measuring channels. So here, if you add one, you can scale it, you can filter it, you can amplify it, and so on. Let's get to the configuration. So first I can set up my control system. I see the version, the start options, if I want to start from my software or from an external participant. If I do have one, like a field bus, I can also select here if I want to have start signals coming from the field bus or from internal, so from the TOX software. Also, you can see your power module settings, your drive data, what type of motor do you have, and is everything defined correctly. Normally, when we ship out our equipment, we pair the power module core with the motor and pre-populate these. So I would be very careful in modifying the values here. And in measuring channels, you can see your measuring channel. So channel always consists of track X and track Y. Normally we want to have our position on track X, and in this scenario I use the internal integrated encoder signal for my position. I can calibrate it, filter it as well. There's many things I can do. On track Y, I normally have my integrated strain gauge sensor, my force sensor, that is also scaled to limits of my drive, filtered, and scaled and calibrated. There's a linear calibration mode or a polynomial calibration mode where you have 3 factors. If I want other channels, so if I have something connected to my edge unit, I first have to define that I have multiple channels. So that's what you do in the TOX control system. On the common parameters, you can add more channels. And this will apply to all your existing processes. So I will not save for now and discard my changes. Also, on the channel icon, you can set up the filters of your velocity, slope, and the grid for sampling. There's tool data you can edit, and accessories you can edit here. Furthermore, you have a counter where you have a counter in value as well as in distance. There's a backup and restore function, so you can set up an automated backup in the settings, but you can also edit a new backup here and backup manually. You can also restore from backup. If you've used our previous TOX software, you may remember that there used to be different software like the works, the HMI config, the server, and so on. If you like to use the works, this is somehow what we show in our device explorer. So this is simply my live environment. If I'm connected to my drive, I see all the data that is on my drive, as well as all the process information live on my drive. Offline, I do see my adapters that I have stored under CTOX3 offline. And the unit is what is always copied and kept updated with my control system. If I want to show both of them, I can display them this way. Show processes here. Now I select the other one, show processes here, and I can compare things like my repair strategy. Look at my return stroke. Okay, it's good. All right, and then I can use this to compare. This folder in your Windows environment is also what you can copy to have a manual backup, and you can also send this to your TOX partner in case you need it. On the other 3 dots, you can find the internal system bus, where you can find detailed information about your EtherCAT system bus. That's really an internal communication between the power module core and the TOX edge unit. So you can pop up some information here, mainly for debugging and information. You can also look at the field bus. And here you see a couple of columns. One is the TOX fixed table that you cannot modify, customer fixed table where you can edit a couple of bits, and the switching table. So a switching table, you can switch on up to 16 pages from 0 to 15. And if a page is empty, you can populate it with any of the parameters on the left. So the left is like a toolbox. You can select in the toolbox between input and output. And you do have a search bar. Let's search for final values. And then I see a couple of parameters that I can drag and drop to my switching table. And you directly see what byte is allocated now with these parameters. When you save it, information is updated to your power module core. I want to discard my changes here. Also, you can assign drive data. This is something you probably don't need to use, but you can show here again different columns, save them as a favorite, and see some drive data, mainly for if you have a tool and this is something that you use for TOX clinching processes. That was it about the other information and other settings. And now I want to show you the last icon, which is the settings icon. In the settings field, you have some general settings like the language. Please pay attention, this is where you need to restart your software. You can have an automatic user logout. And there's some general basic settings, which are mostly self-explanatory. You have some export settings where you can set up what type of data, like the full chart data, you want to export, where you want to export it, and add it, and then you can save it. So if you store it, this is where your new defined export will be saved. You can edit the way the file name looks like, and again, drag and drop information down. Save it, and this is now what your export will look like. You can have a directory cleanup of your export directory, activate a maximum folder size or a maximum age of production data. Same applies for the archive. You can have a maximum number of production days in your archive, and you can perform a cleanup right away. Then you have the unit management. It was where you add other units to your system, to your TOX software, and you need to pay attention to the IP address and select the correct device. In the user management, you can add a new group, like a copy of TOX3, which has quite some permissions. Activate new permissions, give it a name, like a new group. I can store this. And now inside this, I can add a new profile, giving it a name, a password. And I can also select what permissions is this person or user granted. All right. Thank you very much for watching. I've really enjoyed showing you this. And please stay in touch with your TOX partner and get in touch with us. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.